Back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast for the last time in this episode. I'm going to get into the quarterback rankings, the ones that Chris Simms gave just a few days ago on an article that I read. He ranked the top 6 quarterbacks really in the NFL draft going into late April. These aren't my rankings, so I'm not giving my power rankings or how I view them. I'll just react to the ones Chris Simms gets, and I'm sure later on as we get into this whole offseason, I'll drop my quarterback rankings, but I wanted to react to Chris Simms' rankings because these are very interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people would not agree with the way one quarterback is ranked on this, but regardless of that, I'll get into it. He released his rankings a few days ago. In his statements before he gave the rankings, he said, all these quarterbacks in the draft can really be good starters. I don't remember a year of liking this many guys at the top of the draft, and I think that's a fair point that he made, kind of predicating before or just as a preface to what he was about to say. All these guys are very talented, and there's something to like about a lot of them, but there are definitely some things to not like about them, and the way he has them ranked in 4 tiers, and some guys are in the tier of themselves, some guys are bunched in with the other guys. So starting from tier 1, labeled as a class of his own, they're just by themselves at the top, unquestionably, Caleb Williams. I don't have to go into too much of what he said because it's what's been harped on already about Caleb Williams, the arm talent, the ability outside the pocket. I'll say this, that he said his throwing ability on the run is very impressive, which I agree on. Something I really haven't seen be brought up too much. A lot of people keep it very general, but, the rest of it was great arm talent, intelligent, athletic. He compared him to Patrick Mahomes, to CJ Stroud, with the amount of talent that he has. So he has him at tier 1. In tier 2, he had it labeled as the number 1 overall quarterback in other years except this one. That's where Jayden Daniels falls. Specifically with him, he said that mechanically, Jayden Daniels is flawless. Throwing the football, all of his mechanics are great. The way it just looks, his whole motion, it looks great. It looks like he's a starting quarterback already in the NFL. There's nothing wrong there. But still, comparing him to Caleb Williams, Chris Simms had him just a little bit below him, and it's unfortunate, I guess, for Jayden Daniels, but still I think that's right where I would have him, Jayden Daniels. And then in tier 3, you have the biggest group, which is franchise starting quarterbacks, good players in the NFL, that being Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy, and Michael Penix. And about Bo Nix specifically, Chris Simms said in just a verbiage, he said he has a great NFL body, good athlete, he looks like a good runner, good decision maker as well. He mentioned that he just had the frame of a quarterback. Throwing-wise, he was able to make all the reads just from seeing his tape. Again, more points that I can agree on and see. With Michael Penix, he said it was special how he throws the ball. There are some concerns with his size and the amount of injuries he has had, but I think like a lot of people, if you saw his combine workouts, I think you would agree that in the throwing drills, he was one of the ones that impressed a lot with some of the way he made some of the throws look. It looked effortless a lot of times, and a lot of players can't make it look that effortless, but he can, and I am in the same sentiment saying that, he is a little bit on the smaller side, but it's hard to, this is probably why I wouldn't be a good GM, because his arm looks so good that I would probably draft him, and that might not be the right decision just because of injuries and his size. But regardless of that, it's hard to ignore that aspect of his game, and that's why franchise starting quarterback I can agree on. I might have him even a little bit higher than Bo Nix, but, that's just me. J.J. McCarthy was the other one, like I mentioned. And about J.J. McCarthy, Chris Simms said he had his ability to have a variety of arm angles to throw from, sidearm, just different angles that makes it hard to really bunch him in and get him corralled because of that ability. He just looks smooth and underrated, and he has underrated arm power, was what Chris Simms said. And I think he showed a lot of that at the combine with his workouts, and I talked about it before. He came in bigger than a lot of people expected. That raised his stock, at least in my eyes, because, he, in a lot of the games, I don't know if it was just me, he looked very skinny-ish, for lack of a better term. He didn't look as built out as a Michael Penix. He didn't look as stout. That's a good word to use, as Michael Penix or a Caleb Williams, how they're a bit more bulky, I guess, just wide. He looked a bit more of a frail body type, but he came in looking a lot bigger without the pads, and he obviously gained some weight, which was good, I think, and it'll help him a lot. So they were the three that were bunched into Tier 3. And in Tier 4 comes Drake Maye. And about Drake Maye, Chris Simms said, he gives you good flashes, a lot of, wow moments. But he also gives you a lot of questionable moments. He leaves you scratching your head on some of the throws, decision-making that he does. He said that he needs to improve going through the reads, and his mechanics are really all over the place. I saw other analysts and other people in the media say the same thing on ESPN and just other networks as well. So that seems to be a growing trend with Drake Maye, and more as we get into the offseason, I think, at least up until his pro day, I think that's going to be the narrative around him until he shows you otherwise. I'm sure that'll be a big point that he'll try to address in his pro day and make himself look clean in some of the throws he makes, make sure his feet are looking good the way they're supposed to or how the scouts think it's supposed to. But even so, regardless of that, I wouldn't have Drake Maye last, but the way he has the tiers listed, it all makes sense because I didn't mention that he had the last tier as a talented project, and I don't think anybody will question Drake Maye's talent. He has it. He's had success, but because of the way last season ended, him dropping a little bit in just his productivity and people really diagnosing him and analyzing the littlest things about him, I think it makes sense for him to be back there. And just on the overall list, I think it's fair. I think looking at the top of the list, Caleb and Jayden are more interchangeable and closer than people think. Like Chris Simms, I think people will have Caleb number one. He's clear and obvious number one. The Bears are going to draft him, but I think it's a lot closer, and I think more and more people are starting to like Jayden Daniels, maybe a little bit more than Caleb Williams because of the way just the combine ended for Caleb Williams. He didn't throw. He didn't give any medicals. He only answered questions to the media, and some of the answers he gave I found no issue with, but I have seen some people say it came across a little bit arrogant, a little bit full of himself, saying that he didn't feel like he needed to throw because the tape's all out there. People can go look at the tape and make their own assumptions. I see it as confident in his abilities, confident in what he's put out, but some people don't see it that way. That's fair, and I think that's a reason why Jayden Daniels, he didn't give any sort of responses like that. He answered questions, and you haven't really heard anything about what Jayden Daniels said. That is because Caleb is projected to be number one. Jayden's not, so Caleb's going to get a lot more attention put on him. But regardless of that, I think if he would have said something crazy or something that people might not have liked, it would have made headlines, but he didn't. So that's another reason why maybe some people are leaning towards Jayden, character-wise. And ability-wise, I think they're very close with each other, probably equal in terms of talent, being able to make all the throws and creating that magic aspect. I think Caleb might have him beat a little bit on the throw runs and being accurate with them. But, both of these quarterbacks are great in my opinion. They are where they're supposed to be. And just touching on that idea of change and how Drake Maye, I mentioned, could change this over the offseason. I think, one, when all these quarterbacks throw at their pro day, it's going to look a lot clearer of how teams are starting to have him lined up. And it all doesn't really matter until the Bears, the Commanders, or the Patriots either trade out of there or pick one of these guys to see how it all plays out. Because you can have them ranked as much as you want. It all really depends on what the Bears think, if they stay at number one and what they do. But over the offseason, if you see Drake Maye, like I mentioned, perform well at his pro day, you see Jayden Daniels maybe look a little bit bigger at his pro day and look comfortable on top of that, it elevates him even more based on just that, and maybe his character fits more with a team like the Bears than they think Caleb Williams does. And maybe Caleb Williams doesn't perform well at his pro day, and how much does that affect his stock? All of that will be how this could change in the future. We don't know. But another question that could be brought up, I just alluded to it a little bit, team fit. If the Bears or the Commanders think that J.J. McCarthy fits their team better than a Jayden Daniels does. Just as a reference, the Falcons, off the top of my head, in free agency or leading up to the Combine, it looked like they were all in on Justin Fields. That was their guy. It made sense. But more and more reports came out that Kirk Cousins actually is the favorite now because he fits their offense more than Justin Fields, they believe, would. And that's a big reason for some of these quarterbacks dropping a lot. If you see, just in terms of team fit and scheme-wise and what kind of offense you want to run, that matters a lot for a lot of these teams. If they're a run-heavy offense, they don't need a guy that's throwing it or wants to throw it so often. They just want someone that can make all the right throws, all the right reads, and be accurate when he has to throw the ball, not at all times be ready to throw the ball. You might want a Bo Nix in that case. You might want a Michael Penix in that case to not be doing too much. Or if you want a more open offense, creative offense, different sort of plays, motions, and all that stuff, you might really want a Caleb or a Jayden because of their creative ability, able to extend plays and stuff like that. So that makes sense. Team fits is what all makes sense. And which teams are willing to trade up at certain positions to get their guys will be how all of these guys get drafted, in what order. And just to wrap it all up, I've talked a lot about their abilities and what Chris Simms has said about them. To just wrap this up and give them player comps, compare them to some quarterbacks in the NFL right now, just to get an idea of what these quarterbacks could be. Caleb Williams is one that strikes me a lot like an Aaron Rodgers, a Patrick Mahomes. You know, everyone compares him to those guys, at least talent-wise. Trevor Lawrence, that kind of media attention he's gotten. So he would be like an Aaron Rodgers, a Patrick Mahomes. Jayden Daniels, more so or not, he would be almost like a Lamar Jackson because of his running ability. He's very agile. He's very nimble on his feet again. He's a very good runner, but I think he's a little bit more advanced throwing the ball than Lamar was at this point coming into the NFL. I think Lamar is a good thrower now, but it took him a good 2 to 3 years to get to the point where he is now at fitting some of those throws in tight windows and making good reads and executing them on them as well. I think Jayden's a bit further along that path, but regardless, I think he still compares well with Lamar Jackson. And Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, I think Michael Penix kind of reminds me a little bit of Russell Wilson just because of the size, the arm talent. Russ has not been the biggest guy whatsoever, but because he has good touch on the ball, he could throw the ball a mile, and it looks pretty, it's accurate, it's on time. He kind of gives me that sense of a Michael Penix a little bit. Russ might have been more athletic and more outside the pocket than Michael Penix will be, but regardless of that, I think he fits that bill. Bo Nix coming in, good athlete, but just, he is older than these guys as well. So just on that basis, he could be it's tough because he is a good athlete, he has a good frame to him. I don't know, it could be sort of like a a Will Levis or something like that. Just good athlete. They have a good frame to them. But, you still have to see team fit with him matters a lot. And he's going to be successful in the best system that works out for him. He's not going to be trying to do too much. With J.J. McCarthy as well, he could be another one that he doesn't really need the system too much, but he can be that sort of different playmaker that gets this team over the hump. And just Drake Maye, I think, development guy, still I think needs to work out the mechanics of his abilities, of his overall prospect. He could be like a Jordan Love to a certain extent, or even if you want to look at a guy that had to wait, you could argue Aaron Rodgers as well, but Drake Maye, Jordan Love seems to be like the most popular consensus comparison that a lot of people have made, and he's talented. I want to urge that to everyone watching. He is talented, but I just think right now he's not quite ready to get there and show everyone that talented ability without all the fundamentals and mechanics he would have to work out. But that will do it for the list and the show. It was a very interesting way of how he did it, how he labeled all the categories. Is it right? Will he look like a genius, or will he regret some of those things? We're going to have to wait and see when the draft comes. But again, that'll wrap it up for this show today on Friday, the last show of the week. Again, I want to thank or give a huge thanks to everyone that tuned into this episode and was watching it or listening to it as well. Again, please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot podcast on the GSMC Sports Network. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok for more of this network's content. If you want to see more of this show and you want to see more of me, you can go on to the GSMC Sports Network channel or the GSMC Podcast Network channel to see past live shows that are all recorded and are on there, YouTube shorts that I drop as well each and every weekday, as well as individual video segments from the live shows if you missed one or you just want to rewatch a specific segment. Again, this show is every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure to join me at that time on those days for more NFL and football conversations. But I've been your host, Manny Maradiege, wishing you guys a good weekend, and I will see you guys all back here on Monday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.